Hey everyone, welcome as we continue our study through the New Testament, looking at the New Testament church. And today we're going to be in Hebrews 9, verses 11 through 28. And this is where the author of Hebrews is starting to wrap up the idea of Christ being our perfect sacrifice and the comparison between the old system and the old covenant and the New Testament and the new covenant that we see in the two different types of sacrifice. And so he's going to start showing now how Christ is the perfect sacrifice. So we'll read this. It's a little bit of a lengthier read, and then we'll look at the notes. It says, "So Christ has now become the high priest over all things that have come. He has entered the greater, more perfect tabernacle in heaven, which was not made by human hands and is not part of the created world. With his own blood, not the blood of goats or calves, he entered the most holy place once for all time and secured our redemption forever. Under the old system, the blood of goats and bulls and the ashes of a heifer could cleanse people's bodies from ceremonial impurity. Just think how much more the blood of Christ will purify our conscience from sinful deeds so that we can worship the living God. For by the power of the eternal Spirit, Christ offered himself to God as a perfect sacrifice for our sins. So that is why he is the one who mediates a new covenant between God and people, so that all who are called can receive the eternal inheritance God has promised them. For Christ God for Christ died to set them free from the penalty of the sins they had committed under the first covenant. Now, when someone leaves a will, it is necessary to prove that that person who made it is dead. The will goes into effect only after the person's death, while the person who made it is still alive. That will cannot be while that person who made it is still alive, they cannot be put into effect. That is why even the first covenant was put into effect with the blood of an animal. For after Moses had read each of God's commandments to all people, he took the blood of calves and goats, along with water, and sprinkled both the books of God's law and all the people, using hyssop branches and scarlet wool. And then he said, This blood confirms the covenant that God has made with you. And in the same way, he sprinkled blood on the tabernacle and on everything used for worship. In fact, according to the law of Moses, nearly everything that is purified with blood, for the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. That is why the tabernacle and everything in it, which were copies of things in heaven, had to be purified with the blood of animals, but the real things in heaven had to be purified with far better sacrifices than the blood of animals. For Christ did not enter into a holy place made with human hands, which was only a copy of the true one in heaven. He entered into heaven itself to appear now before God on our behalf. And he did not enter heaven to offer himself again and again like the high priest here on earth, who enters the most holy place year after year with the blood of an animal. If that had been necessary, Christ would have had to die again and again ever since the world began. But now, once for all time, he has appeared at the end of the age to remove sin by his own death as a sacrifice. And just as each person is destined to die once, after that comes the judgment, so also Christ was offered once for all time as a sacrifice to take away the sins of many people. He will come again, not to deal with our sins, but to bring salvation to all who are eagerly waiting for him. And so, this, the author here is contrasting the old system, chapter 9, verses 1 through 10 that we looked at yesterday, with the superior sacrifice made by Christ as the high priest, right? The blood of Christ's offering was his own blood, not the blood of animals, right? And so that's what they had been doing for 1,000 years. And so Christ's offering was made and also made in the heavenly tabernacle in heaven, not the earthly one. It wasn't done. And so Christ's offering, rather than being made continually, was just made one time. It was a one-time thing. It didn't have to be done over and over and over again every single year. And so Christ has now become the high priest over all the good things. And so because he was able to do this, he is now the ultimate high priest. His sacrifice is once, it's once for all. We don't have to go. And so not only is he the perfect high priest, his sacrifice was perfect, and so he was appointed by God, right, and was offered as a superior offering here. And so Christ's sacrifice is superior because one, where it was made, it is in the greater, more perfect tabernacle in heaven, rather than simply in an earthly tabernacle. And so one of the things we did talk about, and it mentions here, is that the earthly tabernacle was kind of a mirror, an image of the heavenly one. It was a copy, but it wasn't the perfect one like the heavenly one. And so also Christ's offering, right, is superior because it was made with his own blood rather than the blood of goats and calves. And so Christ's offering is also more superior. He points out all these things because he entered the most holy place once and for all time, and the most holy place of heaven once and for all time. And so, unlike the sacrifices in the old covenant, which had to be made every single year, right? Jesus' sacrifice, his death and his sacrifice only had to be made once and was decisive in securing our redemption forever, right? His sacrifice was good for all time. And that's a wonderful thing for it. And so the author says, how much more, right? And so you're going to see, we're going to see this a couple times in the book of Hebrews, where he argues from a place of lesser to greater, right? And so the logic is that if something is true in a lesser situation, it will be even more true or in a greater situation. And so he's saying if the blood of animals has some effect in cleansing, in cleansing us, then the blood of Christ must be much more effective. And so that's why he uses this term, how much more. We're going to see this a couple more times. And he goes on to say it will purify our conscience, right? Christ's sacrifice, unlike the sacrifice of the old covenant, removes the paralyzing guilt that comes from God, right? By decisively cleansing us from our sinful deeds. And so it removes all that, right? There was the authors talked about that guilt on our conscience, and that guilt that couldn't be removed because of the sacrifice of the blood from goats and bulls and calves and stuff like that. And so he gives us that contrast of how this works. The sacrifice of Christ, the blood of Christ does purify our conscience. And then he goes into kind of gives a general principle about the nature of wills and covenants. And most of us know what a will is, and a will doesn't go into effect until someone passes away. And so the same thing with the new covenant, right? If the covenant, the first covenant was offered through blood, right? The blood of bulls and goats and sheep and stuff like that. Whereas the New Testament covenant was secured through the sacrifice and blood of Christ. And so a lot of times there were many ritual cleansings in the law of Moses, but most of them involved the death of an animal, right? Sacrifice. There had to be blood to cover the sins. And so the shedding of Christ's blood established a new covenant that we see and that we're under today, that provided a pure, permanent purification and complete forgiveness of sins. There's not like once we accept Christ, His sacrifice is enough, right? That's it. That one sacrifice that covers us, that forgives us of our sins, and we're good. So under the new covenant, Christ did not have to offer His sacrifice yearly, right, in the earthly temple, in the earthly tabernacle. Rather, He entered into the presence of God in heaven that one time on an act of our behalf, and that's what covers it. And so His sacrifice makes Him a much better mediator, right, to bring us in a right relationship with God, much more better than the blood of bulls and goats, right? And so who do we want as our mediator? We want Christ to be our mediator and to be in there. And so that is why Christ is a perfect sacrifice. So as always, I hope y'all are learning from these. Tomorrow we're going to get into chapter 10, which again, the author here dives into Christ's sacrifice being once and for all. And that's the thing, you see a lot of this he mentions and he mentions again, and then he kind of double or triple downs on it and really hits it. And so I know some of these things we've kind of gone over a couple of times, but it's important to drill down into them so that we see them. So as always, I appreciate everyone who takes time to watch these. I hope that y'all have learned from them, and I encourage you, if you haven't, to subscribe to our channel. That way you can continue to follow us along. But more than anything, I appreciate everyone who takes time to watch, and I hope y'all have a wonderful day.